Hello, everybody. We are here today with former professional triathlete and current culinary creative, Linsey Corbin. Linsey
Hi.
retired from professional sport in the fall of 2002 and now spends her time working on her culinary business, Hazel and Blue, and working alongside her husband, Chris Corbin, at Corbin Brands. Linsey won 8 Ironmans in her career, competed at Kona an unreal 14 times, and held the American record for the Ironman for several seasons. These days, when she's not working, she runs for joy, plays with her golden retriever Chimmy, fly fishes, and skis the backcountry around Bend, Oregon, where she lives. Linsey, it is great to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Just to correct, I retired in 2022, not 2002.
Oh my God, did I say
2002, I was just
2002?
kidding. Actually, 2002, I didn't even know what a triathlon was then. So, anyways,
We're
recently retired, but I'm sure everyone got that.
So we had coffee a few weeks ago, and you have a really cool and very different way of going about recapping the past year that you've had with your partner, Chris Corbin. Could you tell us what that process is?
Yeah, so the process actually started with my former coach, Jesse Kropelnicki. And at the end of every year, we would go through like what worked well in the year, what didn't work well. It was a process that would like help us goal set and get ready for the next year. And then at home, I started thinking, well, this process is so invaluable in triathlon, and I'm a very goal oriented person. What if I applied that to my personal life?
Mhm.
And then now that I've retired from triathlon, I've been doing the same thing, but applying it to my business life. And so the simple version is like, yeah, you want to look back on your year and be like, what went well? And then look back and think, what didn't go well? Where can I improve? And that sort of guides you into like, how can we make the next year better? Because ultimately, that's what everyone's looking for is like, how do you step up from one year to the next, even if it's just like 1% better or 5% better, or if you're lucky enough, 20% better. But most of us are just looking for like those marginal gains of improvement. And I think it's easy to sit here and be like, oh, let's have a year in review. But I think you need like a concrete program or way to analyze it. And I think turning towards people that you're really trusted with is a great way to do it. Because if you have to like look yourself in the mirror and be like, did I or did I not eat cookies after every meal? Like, you're kind of going to fudge it a little bit. But those that you are trusted with and that you're really close to, and perhaps a little vulnerable with, because it's not easy to hear things that maybe you didn't do well, or no one wants to admit to themselves, like, I'm always late, it's a flaw. But if someone can kind of tell you, like, oh, these are areas that you could improve. So it became an exercise of like, who am I really closest to in my life? And that would be my husband, Chris. And so even towards the end of triathlon, we expanded it beyond triathlon because, Jesse as my coach could say, you need to improve in the pool. But he couldn't say maybe other particular lifestyle habits that Chris had a front row to seat to that would maybe help me in the process towards getting better in the pool. So I would sit down with Jesse, we'd go through a list, and we arbitrarily just picked a number of 10. We
Mhm.
do like 3 swim, 3 bike, 3 run of like, here's 3 areas you can improve. Currently, I do it with Chris. And so we pick 10 areas. Like we try to make a list of about, here's 10 things that went really well this year that you did really well. And they aren't necessarily feelings, but they're
Mhm.
actual like concrete things. Like, you did a really good job of getting up at 6 in the morning and going to the gym every day when it was under your control. You were home, you were healthy, it worked well. You did a really good job of not having a phone at the dinner table and being present for conversations. So, yeah, we go through 10 things that went really well. I just gave 2 examples. And then you go through 10 areas where it's like, I love you, but I think you could improve here. And it's actually a great exercise because it's kind of a place like we have a handshake agreement beforehand that like this is a safe space. I'm going to say some things that like may or may not go over that well. You're going to step up to the conversation with like an open mind and an open heart and be ready to hear some criticism that like you may or may not hear, but if you don't hear it from yourself, you have to kind of hear it from someone else if you
Mhm.
genuinely do want to improve. And some of those things, like on Chris's list this year, I was like, it drives me nuts that you don't turn the lights off. Like we leave to go out and there's like lights on in your office, lights in the bathroom, lights in the hallway. And like, I'm not saying we have to live in the dark, but let's conserve a little bit of energy here, you know?
Yeah,
So
totally.
yeah. And I don't remember if we do, I feel like we kind of do the like, these are areas you can improve first. And then we end on a positive note of like, here's some things you did really good. I think it could be stuff as small as like, turning off the lights to, I know at the start of this call we talked about that I have a desk now, and it was like, I think like you working at the kitchen table is not the most productive thing.
Hmm.
Like you're working on a laptop at the kitchen table, how effective is that for you to do your job? I noticed that you're multitasking and on the internet and have six windows open at once, but maybe if you were like, these are my working hours and you set it aside. And so the I think you take the 10 negative things that, and they aren't negative, 10 things that maybe you could improve in, and then you
Hmm.
go through that list and that helps you set your goals for the next year. So for example, like for me, I knew it was like, okay, an area I need to improve is my productivity. I work hunched over at the laptop at the table. I am online shopping. I'm checking triathlon results. I'm also doing a spreadsheet and trying to work at the same time. How can I mitigate or improve in that? And for that, it was like, you know what? Let's get you a desk. Let's set you kind of office hours. Let's be intentional with your time.
Nice.
So those are kind of just a few examples. I was a bit all over the map on it, but I think also like sometimes and it varies year to year, but a lot of the times now that I'm not a triathlete, I will break like areas for room for improvement down into sections. So like, here's some of your mental limiters, right? So like, here's three or four things that psychologically you could be in a better place about. Here's some physical things. Like here's some, you've really slid off with doing your prehab exercises. You could just have a bunch of different buckets to like break it down and make it. But I do think for it to be successful, it has to be very specific. Like it
Mm.
can't be like you were in a good mood all the time,
Right. Not
or
helpful.
like you're not a morning person. I think it's more like I don't like that you're on your phone first thing and when you roll out of bed in the morning.
Totally. Let's see, you answered a bunch of my follow-up questions through good example giving. A few follow-up questions. Do you remember a specific piece of feedback from your racing days that really made a difference in the following year?
Oh, 100%. Like I had a very, very extremely rare, I think, to have this, but close relationship with Jesse Kropelnicki. I
Hmm.
would put him in like probably one of the top five people that know me best. And he was my coach for maybe the last 10 years of my career. And so he gave me some very specific things, both like mentally, mental limiters of like, don't like, for example, like I was very critical of myself. I
Hmm.
would be very hard on myself when workouts wouldn't go to plan. And I would say always on his list was like, you've gotten a little bit better in this area, but like, let's be kinder to yourself when the workout doesn't go according to plan.
Hmm.
So that would be a perfect example. Or like, you are so hard on yourself. Like, it's just not doing you any favors. Granted, I will
Hmm.
say, in like my defense, I think that that brought me a lot of success. So you don't want to get rid of all of that.
Hmm.
But there would be certain things like your recovery rides are too hard. Like, we need to put a heart rate cap on them. And like, you can't be riding over 120 watts on a recovery ride. So that would be a few specific areas for improvement. And then areas of like, you did great was like, you paid a lot of attention to detail. I always got an A+ in the fueling and the nutrition department. Like, you're always recovery drink in hand right after a workout. But for other people, that could be like a total limiter of like, you know what, you're not recovering well. Let's look behind the curtain at like five things that could improve your recovery. So yeah, a few examples there.
And then moving to the personal side of things, is there a piece of feedback you've received that kind of surprised you, or that you didn't like suspect at all?
I think an area I've improved in a lot is self awareness, which I think has helped me a lot. So
Hmm.
I feel like even this year with Chris, when we went through our list, some of it was like a collaborative effort where you're like, I hate to admit it, but like I'm on my phone in bed. Like that was mine.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. and I need someone to hold me accountable for it. So just tell me that I'm on my phone in bed and we're going to put that on the list.
Nice.
So I would say that a lot of the things, nothing really came as like a shocking surprise to me, but I don't know. I feel fortunate that I think I have a pretty close and open relationship with Chris, that you kind of have an idea of what's coming, but I still think it's a healthy exercise. And I've talked to your group about this before and other people, but I think there is such power in putting pen to paper. I think when you
Hmm.
put pen to paper, like it provides a lot of ownership. So I think people maybe float around in their head, like, I have areas I could improve. I could get to the pool early and do some stretching, or I could not be on my phone before bed. But when you sit down and you like physically write down a list of like 10 things where you want to improve, I think it puts ownership to it, and it's something you have to look at. I mean, for me, like my list sits at the front of my daily training journal slash now life journal. And so I think that there's huge power in like, I think we have all these ideas of like, I could eat better, I could do this. But like when you actually put pen to paper and write it very specifically, like, what do you mean by eating better? Like,
Hmm.
do you mean you could eat better every night of the week? Do you mean, so I think for it to be successful, I think it needs to be like clear and concise. And I think it needs to be written down. And I think it has to have actions that you can be held accountable for.
I think that's great. I love that one of the, like, what you came up with was kind of like, well, actually, it's something that I kind of assigned to myself. So it wasn't a
Yeah,
surprise.
exactly. But I think, yeah, like I said, hearing it from someone else and I mean, and Chris was definitely like, yeah, I agree. You like actually, and where it all spiraled from is like, I could probably get an hour more sleep a night. Well, how do you get
Mhm.
more an hour sleep? Like, let's see what's happening, like leading up to in bed. Either you could sleep in later in the morning. For me, that wasn't an option. So it's like, how can we get to bed earlier? So yeah, no major shockers in the Corbin camp. We'll take it.
Nice. But yeah, I mean, I guess that would be kind of like a real success state, is that you aren't really surprised by the feedback that you're getting because you and your partner or you and your coach have
Yeah.
like a solid collaborative relationship in the first place.
Yeah. But I do think the conversation, and whether it's with a training partner, a best friend, a coach, like it has to be someone very trusted. I think it has to be someone that you feel vulnerable with and like,
Mhm.
okay, that I can have like a really, maybe it's a therapist even, like it just needs to be someone that you can have like a very honest conversation with. And I think you have to step into the conversation like open to criticism. And you may not like what you hear. Like it's pretty crappy to like hear you're not good at this. But you have to release that like everyone has areas where they can improve, but it is kind of a punch to the gut to be like you suck at swimming, which I heard a lot.
I really hear you on the putting pen to paper. I think it does something different to your brain. I think like you remember the information differently because you wrote it down. I don't have any proof of that, but I
Yeah.
really do believe in that.
I will say too, I didn't, now that we're like talking through the whole process, it's probably like an hour long conversation when Chris and I
Mhm.
sit down and have it, and same with when Jesse and I had it. But when you write it down, when you go to do it the following year, you can go through that list. So
Oh,
like
cool.
something, so Chris's list last year was like, you need to shut the cupboards more. Leave the cupboard doors open. And then this year when we
Are
started
just
the
cupboards and lights, the cupboards open, lights are on.
Yeah, I love it. But this year, when we went through the list, like before we started the conversation, it's like, let's go through last year, like what kind of drove you nuts or like where I could improve,
Mhm.
And it was like, oh yeah, I shut cupboard doors. Like for me, I was too freaking intense on my power meter, my metrics, my Strava. I took a year break from Strava, So it was like, it is pretty cool to be like, you're too obsessed with what people think about what you're doing for training. And then this year you can be like, you know what? I took a break from Strava. I don't care anymore. So it is pretty cool to like look back to the prior years.
Mhm.
So if it's an exercise you do now, I definitely suggest if you have it written down at the end of this year when you go to do it, you can also look back on that list and be like, I'm still crushing it in the like no phone before bed department. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I bet that provides a lot of momentum to like keep it going and like make it really feel real that you are changing and developing yourself every year.
yeah. And I think a lot of times too, you change habits and you don't realize they've changed because you don't have a way to recognize it. But if you have that, like it's written down and you have ownership to it, then you remember like, Like even last year, I actually was in a pretty rough spot at the end of the year when we did the year of review. I didn't even write any of my stuff down because I was like kind of in a pretty big hole. And so
Mhm.
this year, when we went to have the conversation, I was like, I don't even really remember what I needed to improve on. And that was kind
Mm.
of sad because Chris had his all like detailed and written out. And he could be like, I shut the cupboards now.
He's like, "That's a thing that I do."
Yeah.
And the lights and the lights will be off this year.
Yeah, exactly.